kings claimed something that sounds outrageous to us. They weren't just rulers, they were descendants of gods, hybrid beings, mighty men of old, the first god kings. And every civilization, Sumerian, Egyptian, Mayan, Chinese, Norse, tells the same story. Before history began, humanity remembered an age of kings, giant rulers who stood halfway between gods and men. The Sumerians said they reigned for thousands of years, long before pyramids, long before Babel, long before our world. These were the first god kings. When the flood passed and the world began anew, the old pattern rose again. Uruk, modern-day Iraq, became the center of new power, a throne raised on the memory of the old world. Before the flood, the world was not primitive. It was guided. Sumer remembered a council of divine beings called the Anunnaki, the princes of heaven, the watchers of the nations, the ones who shaped destinies from the shadows. They were not human. They were the powers behind the human thrones. And the first thrones they empowered belonged to the antediluvian kings, rulers who reigned not for decades, but for centuries, even for millennia. Alulim, Alalgar, and Menlu Anna, Dumuzi the shepherd, Enmedaranki, names preserved on the Sumerian king list, stretching back into a world before memory. These kings were not described as ordinary men. They possessed longevity, knowledge, and authority that later civilizations could barely comprehend. And the ancient world remembered why. Kingship descended from heaven. The Anunnaki granted power, bestowed symbols, revealed forbidden arts, and elevated certain bloodlines. This alliance of divine beings and human rulers created the first global elites, thrones backed by supernatural intelligence. A world unified in knowledge, unified in language, unified in purpose, unified in rebellion. The first god kings were not self-made. They were the products of a cosmic partnership, a merging of heavenly rebellion and human ambition. This was the world before the flood, a civilization advanced, organized, and governed through an alliance of gods and kings. A world Scripture remembers in shadow, a world every ancient culture preserved in myth, a world so corrupted it had to be wiped clean. In Merkur, Lugalbanda, names almost lost to time, kings of Uruk, wrapped in myth, touched by the divine. They walked the line between history and something older. Then came Gilgamesh, 2/3 divine, 1/3 human, warrior, builder, lion slayer. A king who sought immortality and challenged the gods themselves. The Sumerian kings list remembers him as real. The epics remember him as more. In 2003, a German-led archaeological team may have even found his tomb lying beneath the ancient waters of Uruk. For the first time in recorded memory, the god king takes a human face. But Gilgamesh was not alone. Across the world, the same pattern awakened. Narmer in Egypt, the living Horus, Mayan priest kings crowned beneath the world tree, Chinese emperors ruling by heaven's mandate, Inca Sapa Inca, sons of the sun, Norse kings tracing their bloodlines to Odin. Every civilization tells the same story. The throne is never just a chair. It is a ladder, a bridge, a way to seize heaven's authority by force. And Scripture remembers its own God-king, a hunter, a builder, a rebel. Nimrod, whose kingdom began in Babel and Uruk, a name cast in shadow, a figure who becomes the Bible's answer to Gilgamesh, a king who became mighty, language used for divine beings. Different records, same pattern. The world keeps producing God-kings, man reaching upward, man grasping at the divine. From Sumer to Egypt, from China to the Americas, from the earliest myths to the latest empires, the God-king is humanity's oldest idea and humanity's most dangerous one. A throne that reaches toward the heavens will always demand more glory, more power, more worship. But behind every ancient crown stood a presence older than humanity. This motif evokes a time when divine beings walked among humans, took wives, and produced rulers with power, knowledge, and longevity beyond anything ordinary humans could match. This wasn't mythology. This was memory. A memory of the world before the flood. A world where power was inherited not just through bloodlines, but through cosmic rebellion. Most people read Genesis like it's a children's book, but the Bible compresses 2,000 years of pre-flood history into 11 short chapters. Primeval history is brief because it's not a history textbook. It's a theological preface to human civilization. To understand the world before Noah, you have to read the fingerprints it left on every ancient culture. Cyclopean megaliths, global flood traditions, astronomically aligned temples, kings who lived 500 to 900 years, myths of gods descending with knowledge, legends of hybrid rulers, and stories of a civilization destroyed for its corruption. This wasn't a primitive world. It was organized, advanced, and dangerously unified. Humans lived nearly 1,000 years. One astronomer could chart the heavens for 8 centuries. One architect could refine construction for half a millennia. One ruler could reign for generations. Knowledge grew like a rising flood. And then came the moment that changed everything. Genesis 6 records the event that shattered this world. The sons of God saw the daughters of men and took them as wives. Ancient Jews, early Christians, and the entire ancient Near East understood this literally. Divine beings crossing a boundary God had set. These rebels brought forbidden knowledge, weapon mastery, metallurgy, enchantments, astrology, genetic corruption, not as gifts, but as leverage. Knowledge is power, and power creates kings. When divine beings cohabited with human women, the result was a new kind of ruler. The Hebrew word is Gibborim, which means mighty ones. Other cultures called them Apkallu, Anunnaki kings, Nephilim, Titans, Divas, Shining Ones. These hybrid rulers were physically superior, intellectually superior, long-lived. They were worshipped as gods. They were feared as tyrants. And they were preserved in mythology as heroes. They weren't just kings. They were god kings. Human thrones backed by non-human intelligence. This is where the shadow behind the throne comes from, a divine being empowering a human ruler. This wasn't a metaphor. It was the political reality of the pre-flood world and afterwards. The flood was not merely judgment. It was a quarantine, a severing of the corrupted link between heaven and earth, a destruction of hybrid dynasties, a demolition of antediluvian knowledge, a prison for the rebels who crossed the boundary. Genesis gives you the skeleton. Enoch and Jubilees give you the flesh. Together, the picture is unmistakable. The Watchers were imprisoned, their domain was cut off, the world they built was wiped clean. But the idea of the God King survived, because corruption survives through memory. After the flood, something strange happens. The text describes a man who began to become a Gibborim. That's the exact same word used for the pre-flood hybrids. The verb-noun pairing in Hebrew is extremely unusual. Halal, haya. This construction implies a process of transformation, an intentional development, not just the description of innate traits. It implies Nimrod was not born a mighty one, he became one. It implies a process, a transformation, a deliberate pursuit of divine status. Nimrod was the first post-flood empire builder. His capital, Babel. He was the first tyrant, the first king to claim divine authority. He is the prototype of Pharaoh, Nebuchadnezzar, Alexander the Great, the Caesars, and ultimately, the Antichrist. Nimrod was not inventing empire. He was resurrecting something ancient, recovering fragments of the world before the flood, trying to rebuild the age of the God Kings. The books of Revelation and Daniel say the final empire, the beast system, will mirror the first. Harlot Babylon. A ruler empowered by the Watchers, a 10-king structure, a false divine mandate, a global unity built on rebellion. Not because history repeats, but because the same powers behind the thrones have been trying to rebuild the same pre-flood world since the beginning. They want their empire back, and they have no new tricks. The story of the God Kings is the story of Antichrist in seed form, and the world is returning to it. But the new rebellion isn't descending from heaven, it's rising from technology. Humanity is building once again the means to transcend its divinely appointed limits. Technology becomes the new forbidden knowledge, the new corruption, the new gateway, the new bridge between realms. Everything that happened before is happening again, only this time, silicon replaces stone. Artificial intelligence, transhumanism, biotechnology, globalism, quantum computing, UAP, UFO mythology, neural interfaces, surveillance empires, digital Babel, unified language, cosmic ambition. We aren't inventing something new. We're resurrecting something old. The God King is returning, not supernaturally, but technologically. A new Nimrod is coming. A new Babel is forming. A new hybrid world is taking shape. The antediluvian world is being rebooted, and almost no one knows what story they're living in. The first God Kings were a reality encoded in mythology, a memory every culture preserved. They were a blueprint, a pattern, the beginning of a world the Bible expects to return. And in the next episode we go deeper, because Plato preserved a memory older than Egypt, older than Sumer, older than recorded history. A world ruled by 10 kings, unified in rebellion, destroyed in a single day. a world we call Atlantis. But Atlantis didn't sink beneath the sea, it sank beneath the flood.